Open world games are where I lose track of time, and PS5 has some massive ones to get lost in. I've spent countless hours roaming them, and now I'm ranking the best based purely on my own experience. Let's dive right in. Hogwarts Legacy hit me in a way few open worlds do because exploring its version of the wizarding world genuinely felt like slipping into a place I'd imagined since I was a kid. Wandering through Hogwarts, flying over the forest, and getting lost in secret rooms made the world feel alive, even when the story wandered or the performance got messy. The characters I met really sold the fantasy too, classmates with real personality, professors who were fun to be around, and side quests that kept pulling me off the main path in the best way. And the combat surprised me by staying exciting for hours, letting me mix spells together and find my own rhythm. It's not perfect, but the world kept me hooked all the way through, and that's why I'm placing Hogwarts Legacy in the great tier for this list. Ghost of Yotei drew me in mainly because of how confidently it builds on what I loved about Ghost of Tsushima while giving me a protagonist with a sharper, more human edge. Playing as Atsu feels different. She's rough, stubborn, and driven in a way that makes every duel feel personal. The world around her is gorgeous, from snowy mountains to flower fields, and I kept stopping just to take in the scenery. But what really hooked me was the combat. Switching weapons on the fly, landing perfect parries, and mixing in tools like smoke bombs and firearms gave every fight a great rhythm. The story is predictable, but it still kept me invested, and the side quests helped the world feel bigger and more alive. Overall, Ghost of Yotei fits comfortably in my good tier, thanks to its strong action and memorable atmosphere. Red Dead Redemption 2 pulls me in with an open world that feels unbelievably alive, from quiet nights at camp to tense shootouts where every bullet has weight. Arthur's journey is filled with small character moments, tough choices, and a sense of fading freedom that makes the whole story hit harder than most games I've played. Even after hours of exploring snowy mountains, muddy towns, and peaceful lakes, the world still finds ways to surprise me. It's the kind of adventure that sticks with you long after the credits roll, and that's why it earns a place in my masterpiece tier. Final Fantasy VII Rebirth instantly drew me into a massive world filled with adventure, quiet reflection, and constant story twists that kept me engaged from start to finish. I loved wandering through each region, meeting new characters, and watching the team grow as they faced tougher challenges together. The combat felt sharper than before, especially with those flashy synergy attacks that make every battle feel exciting. Some chapters run a little long, but the emotional moments and constant surprises made the journey worth it for me. With all that in mind, this one settles comfortably into my great tier. Web swinging through New York and Spider-Man 2 reminded me why I enjoy this series so much, especially now that I get to switch between Peter and Miles as the story keeps raising the stakes. The combat still hits hard, and the new symbiote abilities make Peter feel completely different in the best way. I loved how the game balances big, explosive moments with smaller emotional beats that show what both heroes are dealing with beneath the mask. Even though the open world activities repeat a bit, the main story had me locked in all the way to the finish. With how much fun I had, this one earns its place in my excellent tier. Getting lost in The Witcher 3 always felt natural to me because the world constantly pulled me away from the main path in the best way possible. Riding across war-torn villages, hunting monsters for coin, and seeing how my choices quietly reshaped the world made every decision feel heavy. The combat finally clicked here too, turning Geralt into someone who feels dangerous when you master signs, potions, and swordplay. Even when the main story drags a little, the side quests and contracts carry so much depth that they end up stealing the spotlight. For how rich, reactive, and unforgettable this world is, it firmly belongs in my masterpiece tier. Night City pulled me in because almost everything meaningful happens off the main path. I spent hours chasing side jobs, meeting strange characters, and seeing how small choices quietly changed future missions. The city itself feels dense and alive, from neon streets to quiet back alleys that hide some of the best stories. Combat gives a lot of freedom too, letting me mix hacking, stealth, guns, and cyberware in ways that fit my playstyle. Bugs definitely broke immersion at times, but the writing, atmosphere, and player choice kept pushing me forward. Despite its rough edges, Cyberpunk 2077 earns its place in my great tier. Star Wars Jedi Survivor made me feel like a fully trained Jedi from the very start. The combat is deeper, smoother, and far more flexible, with different stances letting me fight my own way. The planets are bigger and more detailed, and exploration feels rewarding without rushing me forward. I enjoyed taking time with side paths, puzzles, and optional fights that tested my skills. Cal Kestis also feels more mature here, with a story that focuses on purpose, loss, and finding a place in the galaxy. Performance issues did hold it back at times, but the experience still shines. For me, Star Wars Jedi Survivor sits comfortably in the great tier. No Man's Sky gave me a sense of scale that very few games can match. Flying straight from a planet's surface into space, then landing on another world without loading, still feels special. I enjoyed discovering strange planets, unique creatures, and beautiful skies that made exploration relaxing rather than intense. That said, the moment-to-moment gameplay can feel repetitive, with combat and survival systems that don't evolve much over time. Even so, the freedom to explore at my own pace kept pulling me back. For me, No Man's Sky earns a spot in the great tier. Grand Theft Auto V gave me a world that constantly felt alive and unpredictable. I loved how Los Santos let me switch between three very different characters, each with their own personality, skills, and problems, which kept the story fresh from start to finish. The missions offered insane variety, from big heists to quiet personal moments, while the open world was packed with small details that made it feel real. Whether I was following the story or just roaming freely, there was always something happening around me. For me, Grand Theft Auto V firmly belongs in the masterpiece tier. Elden Ring Shadow of the Erdtree made me feel like I was discovering Elden Ring all over again. The realm of Shadow is dense, layered, and full of secrets that constantly pulled me off the main path, while still giving me clear reasons to keep moving forward. The bosses pushed my endgame build harder than I expected, but every victory felt earned, tense, and unforgettable. I loved how the new weapons, spells, and upgrades encouraged experimenting without losing what made the base game special. It's rare for DLC to feel this complete, and Shadow of the Erdtree easily earns its place in the masterpiece tier. Horizon Forbidden West feels like a confident evolution of everything I loved about Zero Dawn. The world is massive and packed with meaningful activities, and I never felt like I was wasting time while exploring its ruins, settlements, and wild machine-filled landscapes. Combat is deeper and more flexible, thanks to the expanded weapon set, new tools, and machines that demand smart planning instead of brute force. Aloy's journey stays engaging throughout, supported by strong visuals, solid character work, and a world that genuinely feels alive on PS5. It may not reinvent the genre, but it delivers an incredibly polished and memorable experience that comfortably sits in the great tier. Avatar: Frontiers of Pandora does a solid job of capturing the look and atmosphere of the films, and exploring Pandora is easily the game's strongest point. The forests are stunning, vertical, and full of life, and I often found myself wandering just to take it all in. Combat mixes bows, stealth, and human weapons in a way that feels decent, but it never truly stands out, and the open-world structure leans heavily on familiar Ubisoft busywork. Crafting and gathering are deeper than expected, yet inventory limits and repetition can wear thin over time. It's enjoyable in moments, visually impressive throughout, but rarely memorable as a full experience, placing it in the mediocre tier. Dragon's Dogma 2 doesn't make things easy, and that's something I felt from the very beginning. This world expects preparation, patience, and commitment, and it never bends to help you out. Fast travel is limited, choices stick, and even staying alive means carefully managing health, supplies, and where you rest. Combat is intense and chaotic, especially with huge monsters showing up almost anywhere, and party management with pawns adds real strategy and personality to every fight. The story and quests can be vague, but the sense of danger and adventure is always strong. It's demanding, sometimes frustrating, but deeply rewarding if you accept its rules, which is why it lands in the great tier. Death Stranding Director's Cut is a game I went back to with mixed feelings because I still remembered the tension, the long walks, and the constant fear of losing my cargo. Playing it again on PS5, everything feels sharper and more immersive, from the landscapes to the performances and the sound design. The haptics and adaptive triggers make every delivery feel physical, and the added tools like cargo catapults, jump ramps, and the buddy bot make travel smarter without losing the challenge. The story still hits hard, carried by strong characters and a haunting atmosphere that stays with me long after a session ends. With its technical upgrades and thoughtful additions, this version stands as the best way to experience Kojima's vision, comfortably earning its place in the excellent tier. Death Stranding 2 on the Beach is the kind of sequel that made me realize how much untapped potential the first game really had. This time, the world feels smoother to play in, The combat is more flexible, and the strange ideas actually come together instead of fighting each other. I loved how planning routes, dealing with harsh environments, and handling enemies now feels more confident and less frustrating, while still keeping that slow, thoughtful pace. The story goes to some genuinely wild places, but it also hits harder emotionally, with stronger characters and better momentum. With smarter design, bolder storytelling, and a clearer sense of purpose, this sequel earns its spot comfortably in the excellent tier. Baldur's Gate 3 felt like one of those rare games where every choice I made actually shaped my journey in a meaningful way. I loved how deep the role-playing goes. From conversations that branch in unexpected directions to companions who feel layered, flawed, and genuinely human. Combat can be tough and sometimes unforgiving, but experimenting with abilities, spells, and clever tactics always kept me engaged. The world reacts to what I do, remembers my actions, and constantly tempts me with new paths I didn't even plan to take. With its incredible writing, freedom of choice, and unmatched depth, Baldur's Gate 3 easily earns its place in the masterpiece tier. Assassin's Creed Valhalla kept me busy for a long time, mostly because of how huge and detailed its version of Dark Ages England is. I enjoyed sailing rivers, leading raids, building up my settlement, and watching the story slowly unfold through alliances and betrayals. Combat feels heavy and satisfying once you unlock enough abilities, even if it starts a bit simple, and I liked having options to lean more into stealth or full-on Viking brawls. The world looks amazing on PS5, but the experience is often held back by bugs, uneven pacing, and progression systems that don't always feel rewarding. I still had fun exploring, raiding, and living the Viking fantasy, but the rough edges stop it from reaching higher highs, which is why Assassin's Creed Valhalla sits comfortably in the good tier. Immortals Fenyx Rising was a fun surprise for me, mostly because of its lighthearted take on Greek mythology and its bright, colorful world. I enjoyed exploring the Golden Isle, listening to Zeus and Prometheus bicker like they're narrating a mythological sitcom, and fighting monsters using flashy god powers that always felt satisfying to use. Combat stayed enjoyable as I unlocked new abilities and builds, but the exploration and puzzles rarely impressed me, with many challenges feeling repetitive and a bit too basic. I liked spending time in this world, and the humor carried me through, but the lack of clever puzzle design kept it from standing out more. That's why Immortals Fenyx Rising lands in the good tier for me. Dragon Quest XI's felt like a comfort RPG that just kept getting better the longer I played it. I loved how classic and clean the turn-based combat felt, with fights staying tense without becoming frustrating, and bosses often forcing me to rethink my setup. Exploring the world was rewarding, whether I was hunting treasure, forging better gear, or just riding between towns and soaking in the music and monster designs. The story didn't always hit hard for me, and some old-school humor didn't land, but the gameplay systems, pacing, and sense of adventure kept me fully invested for dozens of hours. For me, Dragon Quest XI's earns its place in the excellent tier. Dying Light the Beast felt like a familiar return to rooftops, zombies, and tense nights, but with a rough new twist. I enjoyed tearing through enemies using the beast powers, smashing crowds with raw strength, and still feeling real fear when night fell and volatiles started hunting me. The parkour and melee combat remained fun and reliable, even if most of the experience feels close to earlier Dying Light games. The story didn't hold my attention much, and the world doesn't surprise as often as I hoped, but the moment-to-moment action kept me playing through side quests and boss fights without regret. Because of that balance of fun and repetition, I placed Dying Light the Beast in the good tier. Ghost of Tsushima stayed with me long after I put the controller down. I loved wandering across its windswept fields, following the guiding wind, and getting lost in a world that feels calm one moment and brutal the next. The sword combat is easily one of the best I've played, where every duel feels tense, skill-based, and cinematic, and improving comes from learning techniques, not grinding numbers. While stealth and enemy AI aren't always perfect, the emotional story, powerful music, and striking visuals carry the experience with confidence. Because of how strongly it blends atmosphere, combat, and storytelling, Ghost of Tsushima firmly earns its place in the masterpiece tier. Tales of Arise felt like the moment the series finally reached a new peak for me. I enjoyed how it mixed a serious story about oppression with characters that actually clash, grow, and feel human over time. Combat stayed exciting from start to finish, with fast action, flashy moves, and smart teamwork that made even normal fights fun to play instead of something to skip. I also liked how respectful it was of my time, with smooth, fast travel, clear maps, and plenty of side content that never felt forced. With its strong visuals, improved systems, and confident direction, Tales of Arise comfortably sits in the great tier. Fallout as a board game surprised me the second time around. Once the expansions are in place, especially the cooperative focus from Atomic Bonds, it finally feels like a proper wasteland adventure instead of a frustrating competition. Exploring the map, stumbling into quests, meeting familiar factions, and making tough choices captures that slow, dangerous Fallout vibe really well. It still asks for a long session and doesn't fully shine without its expansions, but as a complete package, it delivers a satisfying mix of exploration, theme, and teamwork. With those strengths in mind, Fallout lands solidly in the great tier. Exploring Teyvat was the main reason I kept coming back to Genshin Impact. Every area feels packed with things to do, whether it's spotting a puzzle in the distance, chasing a floating spirit, or stumbling into a boss fight I wasn't prepared for. Combat stays fun thanks to constant character switching and elemental combos, and unlocking new characters genuinely changes how the game plays. While the story can feel unfocused and the gacha grind becomes noticeable later on, the sense of freedom, discovery, and progression never really fades. Taken as a whole, the experience is strong enough that Genshin Impact earns its place in the excellent tier. I got pulled into Diablo IV almost immediately, thanks to its tight combat and that constant urge to chase better loot and cleaner builds. Running dungeons, experimenting with different classes, and slowly refining my gear stayed satisfying for dozens of hours, especially once the endgame systems opened up and gave me clear goals to work toward. The campaign doesn't always keep its momentum, and a few technical hiccups can interrupt the flow, but the atmosphere, sound design, and moment-to-moment gameplay do a lot of heavy lifting. By focusing on refinement rather than big reinvention, the experience kept me coming back far longer than I expected. Diablo IV lands firmly in the great tier. I lost countless hours in Skyrim because it always gave me something meaningful to do, whether I was chasing dragons, joining guilds, or simply wandering into caves I wasn't supposed to find yet. The freedom to build my character my way, learn skills just by using them, and shape my own story made the world feel alive and personal. Small moments like discovering hidden quests, experimenting with magic and shouts, or just soaking in the music while crossing snowy mountains stayed with me long after I turned the game off. Even with its rough edges and bugs, the sense of scale, choice, and immersion never faded. That's why The Elder Scrolls V, Skyrim belongs in the masterpiece tier. From the moment I landed in Hawaii, like a dragon, Infinite Wealth had me completely hooked. Exploring the new setting felt fresh. The story struck a great balance between heartfelt drama and absurd humor, and the characters, especially Ichiban and Kiryu, felt stronger and more meaningful than ever. The turn-based combat finally feels lively, with better movement, smarter positioning, and fights that stay exciting instead of repetitive. On top of that, the side activities are packed with personality and never felt like filler to me. With its improved combat, memorable story, and massive amount of enjoyable content, like a dragon, Infinite Wealth comfortably sits in the great tier. Rise of the Ronin gave me mixed feelings overall. I loved the sword combat, which feels sharp, challenging, and very satisfying once I learned its systems, and Team Ninja's experience really shows in those intense fights and boss battles. Exploring 19th century Japan and playing co-op missions with friends was enjoyable too. But the open world is weighed down by too many icons, side activities, and piles of mostly useless loot, which pulled me out of the experience more than I liked. When it focuses on combat and story missions, it shines, but the bloat holds it back. So for me, Rise of the Ronin lands comfortably in the good tier. Forspoken was a rough experience for me. While I enjoyed the flashy magic combat and the fast, fun traversal that lets me fly across the world, almost everything else dragged it down hard. The writing and dialogue constantly pulled me out. The main character never grew on me, and the pacing, especially in the early hours, was painfully slow and frustrating. The open world looks nice, but it's bloated with repetitive tasks and uneven difficulty spikes that kill the momentum. There are moments where the game feels exciting, but they're buried under bad storytelling and design choices, which is why Forspoken firmly sits in the trash tier for me. Final Fantasy XVI really pulled me in with its dark tone, strong characters, and a world that feels heavy with history and conflict. I loved following Clive's journey, watching him grow over time, and getting invested in the relationships and political drama around him. The combat leans fully into fast, flashy action, and while it steps away from classic RPG depth, it still feels satisfying and cinematic, especially during the massive boss fights. Not everything lands perfectly, and some RPG systems feel lighter than expected, but the storytelling, music, and spectacle carry it through. By the end, it comfortably earns its place in the great tier. Stellar Blade surprised me with just how confident and polished it feels as an action game. The combat is fast, flashy, and deep, with satisfying parries, dodges, and combos that never got old, even deep into the campaign. I enjoyed exploring its semi-open areas, taking on side quests, and slowly upgrading Eve through skills, gear, and different playstyle boosts. The story leans into stylish sci-fi drama rather than subtle writing, but it works thanks to strong atmosphere, striking enemy designs, and constant momentum. It's overloaded at times, but it rarely loses its grip, and the moment-to-moment gameplay carries it comfortably. For me, Stellar Blade earns its place in the excellent tier. Demon's Souls Remake reminded me why this series became so special in the first place. Playing it on PS5 feels tighter, smoother, and far more responsive than the original, while still keeping that slow, careful combat where every mistake matters. I loved how the separate worlds let me change direction when I hit a wall, and the boss fights remain some of the most creative and memorable From Software has ever made. The quality of life upgrades, fast load times, and stunning visuals remove a lot of old frustration without losing the soul of the game. In the end, this remake doesn't just preserve a classic, it elevates it, which is why Demon's Souls comfortably sits in the excellent tier. Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 pulled me into its world in a way I didn't expect, with grounded medieval combat, strong writing, and a story that feels more like a historical drama than a typical RPG. I spent dozens of hours getting lost in its cities and countryside, tackling side quests that actually felt meaningful instead of filler, and watching Henry grow through smart choices rather than fantasy power-ups. The swordplay is more polished than the first game, the quests are consistently memorable, and the world feels alive and carefully researched. That said, the game sometimes struggles to balance its cinematic story with its open-world freedom, which led to a few immersion-breaking moments for me. Even with those issues, it's a rewarding, ambitious RPG that sticks with you long after the credits, earning its place in the good tier. Monster Hunter Wilds feels like Capcom really focused on making the hunt smoother and more enjoyable, and I noticed that right away while moving from fight to fight without constant stops or loading screens. Combat feels flexible and fast, the monsters look incredible, and the new systems make tracking, wounding, and breaking parts more natural than before. I liked how the world changes with weather and how each area feels alive, and even the story kept me more engaged than past entries. The downside is that the challenge rarely pushed me to rethink my gear or tactics, even late into the game, which took away some of that classic Monster Hunter tension. Still, the moment-to-moment hunting is a blast, and the improvements outweigh the flaws, which is why this one confidently lands in the great tier. Black Myth Wukong hooked me with its fast, precise combat and an incredible focus on boss design that never lets things feel dull. I loved how it borrows Souls-like ideas without fully copying them, instead leaning into dodging, counterattacks, and stance-based staff combat that rewards patience and learning enemy patterns. Nearly every boss feels unique, the gear and spell systems have surprising depth, and I often had to rethink my build to overcome tougher fights. Add in striking Unreal Engine 5 visuals, strong music, and a mythological world full of secrets, and it's hard not to admire the confidence behind it. Minor performance dips aside, this is a standout action game and a huge achievement for the studio, earning its place in the excellent tier.